Sandra Murray, and I am the president of our association. And on the conference here on Zoom, you can also see Joe Powers, Laura Mullen, and Kyle Wolf is our secretary and our wonderful board who keeps us all busy and has great speakers for us every month. So just to give you some expectations for today's meeting, we always start off with some quick announcements. Of course, we have some amazing speakers today to talk about mead, and then we'll have some Q&A after the speaker, as well as, if you stay to the very end, we have virtual door prizes. And let me tell you, today, you don't want to leave early. We've got some great prizes at the end of our meeting today. So as always, your HBA membership goes a long way every year. We get amazing speakers, you get to connect with your neighbors who are beekeepers, and also get our SCEP and also notices for swarms throughout Houston. Also right now, you would have seen in the SCEP as well as on our Facebook site, we are posting a survey to get your feedback on when we should come together. As you know, many of the requirements have lifted across Houston, so we're able to come together in person. So we wanted to get your feedback on when and where you'd like to come together this year. So please take the opportunity to provide your feedback. We're really interested in hearing from you. All right, so today we have Mike and Cathy Rape. They are owners of the Ferm, which is a meadery in Conroe. And so we are so excited for them to share with us today the great efforts they've gone to make amazing mead, and hopefully leave us with some tips on how we can make our own. All right, with that, Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much. I'm assuming that I have unmuted myself. And
I can hear you.
Process of sharing my screen. All right, perfect. There we go. Number one, Sandra, that was a very high energy introduction there to the rest of the beekeeping community and for us as well. So hopefully, Cathy and I can keep at least half of that energy going throughout the process here. But before we get started, I need to let everyone know. Well, seeing as that we're at a meadery. I'm drinking. I'm not sure what you guys are drinking, but if you are, I need to let you know what's going on here. I know that Laura is drinking some raspberry mead. Look at there, Laura. Cheers to you. So what we have here is, this doesn't look like your traditional mead, does it? Well, we do a draft style or a session style mead here as well. And the darkness of this mead comes from a bochet honey or a caramelized honey. I'm not sure bochet is actually a word. So you caramelize the honey. We've done this to 7% and then added a Czechoslovakian Saz hops, which is provides earthy, peppery aromatics with some spices. And we call it Checkmate, C-Z-E-C-H, mate. Czech, spelled like Czechoslovakia because that's where we get the hops. So it's quite interesting. It's kind of a dark, bold. I've had some people say it's kind of like a Shiner box style, but I'm not a big Shiner drinker, so I wouldn't be able to confirm nor deny if that was just truly the case or not. So anyways, cheers to everyone that's joining us tonight. I guess what we'll do is just jump right into the presentation. All right, so first of all, who are we? Naturally, you've seen both Cathy. There she is right there. And then myself, Mike, and that's us on the screen there. I'm the one on the left if you haven't figured that out. Our names, well, there it is right there, Mike and Cathy Rape. So we are lifelong Montgomery County residents. We are beekeepers and also members of Montgomery County Beekeepers Association. Now, just a very, very quick, which I hope to be quick. I just asked Cathy, this marks our 3rd year of being beekeepers. And we, as a matter of fact, we got our bees on this weekend 3 years ago, and James Elam told me not to do it. Here's why. I told Cathy, I said, honey, we make mead. We should probably get into this beekeeping thing and figure out what that's all about and start making our own honey for our own home brew. That same weekend, I found a Facebook ad that says, elderly lady needs help, fallen tree in yard, bees swarming in tree. I told Cathy, I was like, I can operate a chainsaw. Let's go get the bees. And she's like, no, don't go get the bees. I said, okay, Well, let's go talk to James and Cherry Elam and let's get their advice. Well, what did we do? We went to James and Cherry's place and James said, don't go get the bees. Well, James had never met me before. He didn't know what I could or couldn't do. And he was only telling me not to do that for pure safety's sake. So I agreed with him that it probably was a bad idea. Inevitably, we bought brand new suits, bought smokers, we bought boxes, we bought everything we needed. And we get out to the end of James and Cherry's drive and we turn left to go to our house or right to go get the bees. Well, I turned right and Cathy looked at me. What did you say?
We're going to get the bees.
Yeah.
Aren't we?
She goes, we're going to get the bees. And I said, yes, we are.
So we show up at this lady's house in brand new bee suits, a
Brand new.
never lit smoker, and walked up to bees on purpose for the first time.
And you know what? We got them out. I got pictures to prove it. So it was a very interesting experience. It is all about the art of the chainsaw. But that was our first experience with bees. And after that, we bought other nucleus colonies and so on and so forth. But we love the bees. They are up at our ranch in Anderson right now because they get kind of out of hand and out of control over here. So we sold some to kind of, anyways, that's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother presentation. We're here to talk about mead. Okay, so we are members of Montgomery County Beekeepers Association. We're hobby collectors. This is one of the hobbies that we collect, but we have many more, which as well would be an entirely different presentation. And as mentioned, we are owners and mead makers at the Ferm Meadery in historic downtown Conroe. And of course, now it's time to insert the shameless plug right here before we get going. We are now open. This is our 9th weekend. And as stated, we are at 225 Simonton Street in historic downtown Conroe. We are right across the street from the courthouse. So we get the lawyers, we get the people that are just out on bail. And actually our customer base is much better than that. But we do get some lawyers in here, which is quite interesting, and some county judges and the mayor and half a city council. So if you need anything related to city council for the city of Conroe, let me know. I got you covered. If you need to contact us, we're at thefermmeadery.com. And of course, mine and Cathy's email address will be at the end of the presentation. All right, so now to get back to what we're really here for, history of mead. So it would go without saying that we need to kind of discuss where mead came from and why it is what it is today. But, you know, we can't really get into the whole meat of mead making. And Cathy, please jump in. I tend to just take over. So sometimes she might just push me out of the view of the camera here just so she can get a breath and talk. But mead is inevitably and arguably one of the most or the oldest alcoholic beverage known to man. Now,
Chances are in the very beginning it made itself, because all you need is a tree full of bees to fall down and you need it to rain, and there's enough yeast in the environment to make mead. So it's probably first discovered more than made.
True. That is correct. I mean, it's probably one of the only beverages that is self-fermenting that needs no assistance from any other hands at all. Just rain and God and yeast, and there you go. You've got mead. But to kind of back that claim up, you know, back in northern China years ago, there was an archaeological dig that produced pottery vessels which contained signs of rice and fermented honey and other organic materials dating back to 7000 BC. So that's a pretty bold claim, and it's backed up by that right there. I'm not sure what the wine and the beer brewers might have for historical documents on that, but who knows? Maybe they were making some sort of sake mead or maybe a metheglin mead, but we'll never know because that's an ancient Chinese secret. Get that? 7000 BC. Okay. Sorry, sometimes I gotta explain the jokes to Cathy, and maybe to you guys. I don't know. Okay, okay. So let's talk about Bacchus. The ancient Greeks honored Bacchus, and he is the god of wine, right? But before he was known as the god of wine, he was widely known as the god of mead. Middle Ages Queen Elizabeth, she had her own royal mead recipe. Chaucer wrote of mead. Shakespeare drank mead. And mead has been traced from the time of Beowulf to the court of King Arthur and that of Charles II. However, the mead's biggest claim to fame is the origins of the wedding celebration, or the word also that you guys know as the honeymoon. So as it goes, during the month-long celebration after bride and groom were married, the the bride was often sent to her bedchambers, and then the bridegroom was filled up with mead, and to the point where he couldn't stand, right? And then he was sent off to to his bride in hopes to sire a child for themselves and for the parents and someone to carry on the family name. So, and if a child was actually sired and it was a boy, then the mead maker was given rewards and just highly regarded and fame and so on and so forth. But I'm not sure about you guys. If I drank mead to the point where I couldn't stand, I can probably list an entire list of things that I couldn't do. So we'll just leave that there and we'll move on to the next slide. All right, so what is mead? A lot of people come into our meadery and just out of sheer curiosity, because we're the newest, coolest thing in town, which we're happy for. But one of the biggest questions is, well, what is mead? And when we give tours, it's quite simple. The biggest thing that I say is that mead is it's fermented honey. That's really what mead is. And what we are is we're a winery. We're a G permit producing winery as licensed by the federal government and the state government. So we are no different than the traditional wine that you know. The process is the same, from the tanks to the bottles to the pumps. And for the most part, the yeast is exactly the same, depending upon what we're going to do. So we are a winery, but there's really only one difference that separates us from the traditional wine that you know and the mead or honey wine that we make, and that's all about the fermentable sugars. So whereas wine, the wineries use grapes as their fermentable sugars, we use honey. So mead is fermented honey, as it stated before. Our primary fermentable sugar is honey. So there are basically three types of mead that we need to discuss and kind of subcategorize. A hydromel. This is a hydromel, right? Hold on. It is a session mead. We call it a draft style mead. Why do we call it a draft style mead? Because the vast majority of people that's never heard of mead have no clue what a hydromel is and have no clue what a session mead is. So we've got to start with the common ground so we can kind of get those guys up to speed as to what we're doing. But a hydromel is a weaker or lower ABV mead that's between 3.5% to 7.5%. This is 7%. We keep all of our draft style meads at 7 or under. Why is that again? She's my legal eagle here. But
taxes and labeling.
So if we keep below 7%, we do not have to have a label approval from the federal government or the state government. All we do is have a product registration. So it pays, well, it doesn't pay the government because it's less taxes, but it pays for us to be able to bring things out to market a heck of a lot faster than a still or standard strength mead. So as it says, there's also known as a session mead, or as we would call it, a draft style mead. And again, the draft style is our nomenclature. It's not really a recognized term in the mead industry. But again, we're just trying to bridge that gap there. All right, a standard strength mead or a still mead is between 8% and 13% ABV. And that's probably what Laura is drinking, quite possibly, is a standard strength between 8 to 13%. If she finishes that glass and goes and gets another one and she's missing by the end of the presentation, it's probably a sack mead, which is a mead with a very high honey content and a high ABV between 14 and 18%. So she says no, but only time will tell. We will see what she's truly drinking by the end of the presentation. Okay, so we talked about the types of mead. Now let's talk about the styles of mead. Honey, you want to kind of cover this?
All righty. So traditional mead, that is basically just the water, the honey, and the yeast, and it's not generally spiced or fruited. It can be back sweetened with honey after the fermentation finishes, but generally no additional flavors besides the honey. Bochet, Mike already talked about this, where you caramelize the honey first. It gives it a really pretty dark color, kind of toasty, caramelly, toffee notes sometimes. It's just really nice change up. It's also, let me just caution you, if you're going to do this at home, there's a couple of ways to do it. You can do it in a crock pot, and that's probably the safest way, or you can do it over the stove. If you do it over the stove, you need lots, like maybe only fill your pot about a third full. You need lots of headspace because that honey expands. And unlike a pot of water that's boiling over, if you turn the heat off, it's not going to go right down. It's just going to keep coming like lava. So just
3
be
times its
aware.
volume, it will expand.
Be aware of that. It does expand. Even in the crock pot, it expands. And so you have to give it a lot of room to do that. Melomel is with fruit added into the mead, either during the fermentation or after the fermentation. There's subcategories of melomels. For example, are we going to have notes on that? Yeah, Sizer would be a subcategory. It's a fruit, particular fruit's an apple. If that particular fruit's an apple, it's a Sizer. Capstamel, if you use chili peppers. And we got metheglin. Metheglin is spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, clove. Careful with clove because that really likes to take over.
Clove will take over.
Yeah. And then did we have piment on there? Yep, piment. That's going to be another subcategory of melomel where the particular fruit that you use is grapes. So it's kind of a hybrid between mead and wine. That was actually super popular in the ancient days. A lot of that pottery that they dug up had both grape juice and honey. Rhodamel, ancient tea mead with rose petals. So yeah, flower petals are a really interesting additive for mead. You can also make carbonated sparkling mead. You can do that either by forced carbonating, which is what we generally do with our hydromels, where we're forcing carbon dioxide into the finished beverage, or you can bottle condition it like they would traditionally do champagne, where you are actually putting the sugar into the bottle and then corking it and letting it finish fermenting in the bottle, which is a little tricky because you're gonna end up with bottle bombs that way.
Yeah, gotta be careful.
You really gotta know what you're doing on that one and make sure you're following the proportions very exactly. And then an acerglyn, that would be mead made with honey and maple syrup. Those are delicious. I love those. And then a braggot is when you are using malted grains like you would traditionally use for a beer with the honey. So yeah.
Yeah. Now, interesting note on the braggot. It's a honey product, right? A fermented honey product. However, because of our federal and state governments, actually it's more state than federal because rules change from state to state as far as their alcoholic beverage commission is concerned. But however, here in Texas, we cannot make a braggot because it contains malts or barleys or things typically known to be brewing beer. So we're not a brewery. We're a winery. So the state says, no, you cannot have any grains. You cannot not have any malts. You cannot have any finished beer or pre-finished or pre-fermented beer products on your premise. So who makes a braggot? Well, a brewery can make a braggot. We can't make a braggot, but a brewery can make a braggot because they're using honey as less than 51% of their fermentable sugars. So quite interesting. I mean, these are things that we're planning on doing with some of the local breweries around here, but it's really only for just cool talk, right? Going, hey, we did a collaboration with Foss Brewing or with Southern Star or what have you. We just, it's cool to do those collaborations and work with other people in the industry locally. But yeah, we can't make it, nor can we serve it here in our tap room. All right, so let's talk about equipment. Equipment is very important. Everything that I'm telling you here, some of it is optional, some of it is not optional. I mean, you can replace some of this stuff with common things you have in your house, but the biggest thing I can tell you is before you replace anything is it cleanable? Is it sanitizable? Can you do a clean fermentation in it without introducing any other microbes or bacteria or what have you? One of the most important things is your primary fermentation vessel. This is a bucket, right? It's a food grade, food safe, sanitary bucket, which you can get at Home Depot, to be honest. I mean, all of the buckets are made out of the same type of plastic, all the same type of recyclable plastic. If you can clean and you can sanitize it, you can ferment in it.
I was going to say, watch out for scratches. I wouldn't suggest using an older bucket because if you have scratches inside, the bacteria and things can get into the little grooves of a scratch. So you do want a new bucket or one that hasn't been abused and beat up.
Right. Post-fermentation vessels, these are typically called carboys, and they're anywhere from 3 gallon to 6.5 to 7 gallon. They're typically glass, because what you want to do is you don't need to see what's going on in your primary fermentation. You just know that yeast are eating your sugars and creating carbon dioxide and alcohol, right? And they're creating a lot of haze and a lot of junk in that process. So once you move everything over to your secondary or your post-fermentation vessel, that's where you want to look and see how your haze is clearing, how your dead yeast cells are settling and flocculating down to the bottom. So that's why a lot of these people use a glass or a plastic carboy for this secondary or post-fermentation. Well, you can still do it in a bucket, but that's not what we do. We use a big bucket. It's 250 gallon bucket. Okay, so Cathy had mentioned scratches. So you definitely need something to stir with, right? So I wouldn't recommend wood, but a plastic or a stainless steel spoon. If you use stainless steel in a plastic bucket and you're not careful, you might put that minute scratch, very tiny scratch in that bucket. And guess what? That's where your bacteria is going to hide. So you need to be very, very careful of that. Oh, hey, did I mention to the group what this is? So we hosted our very first gender reveal party. And it just so happens that Cathy and I are grandparents, and we're going to have a grandbaby boy. So that's what that's about. I'm sure that was distracting a lot of people. So now you know. The more you know, you're informed now. Okay, moving on to more equipment, a hydrometer and a beaker. This is if you don't, you've got to buy this. That's what I'm saying. You've got to buy this, because if you don't buy this, you're going to start a fermentation, you're going to end a fermentation, you're going to have no clue what you got as far as alcohol content. And that's very important. It's also important to be able to test your fermentation in stages as you're going to make sure that you're actually fermenting, because you can look at it and you can tell, you can smell that it's fermenting, but a lot of that can throw you off. It might just not be doing what it needs to do. So a hydrometer is going to tell you where you are in your stages of fermentation. We'll get in more into hydrometers a little bit later. Airlock bungs. This is for your primary and your post-fermentation vessels. These are airlocks that allow CO2 out, but no oxygen in. Oxygen bad. Well, oxygen bad at a certain stage of fermentation. And then you got your siphon and your racking tube. Clearly, this is to move product from one vessel to the next. Bottles and corks. Well, unless you want to put a big straw in that 5-gallon demijohn, which is totally up to you, I would advise having corks in bottles. Well, it would be the first big straw I've seen in a 2-gallon bucket, but we won't talk about that one. Will we, Laura? I'm joking. I'm calling Laura out. I've never even met Laura, but she just seems like the person I want to pick on tonight. Okay, sanitizers. Yes, I said that 3 times because this is extremely important. Like the hydrometer, don't start a fermentation without a hydrometer and without sanitizers. If you do, you're destined for failure, or you're destined to drink horrible, horrible mead. I know this because I've done it. So, and it was stuff that I made. Actually, Cathy made it. She did. I made it, right? Okay. Moving on. Additives. This is a one-step. It's a no rinse cleaner. It's basically it's a solution that you mix up so many parts one step to so many parts water, and you mix it around in your primary fermenter. You want it to touch the surface for a certain amount of time. All the instructions are on there, and it cleans and sanitizes. Again, this is just one of many products. And by the way, the products that I show on this slideshow is not like that I recommend that, or it's just what I've used and what I know. But for everything that I show you, there's another 10 just like it out there. So by no means is this any endorsement for a particular product that's coming up here, like Star San. Star San's a self-foaming sanitizer. It's typically a 60 to 90 second sanitizer. We'll mix it up about 2 tablespoons per 5-gallon bucket. And we will allow our utensils, our stirring spoons, our racking canes, siphons, all of that stuff to sit in this solution for at least 60 to 90 seconds. And then it's got to be clean first, then sanitize. So once it's clean, then we can sanitize it. Again, it's very, very, very important. Potassium metabisulfite, it's kind of a dual use thing. It can be used as a spray or spritz sanitizer, as well as a antioxidant for finished product, as well as, well, I'm not even going to get to that. I'm jumping ahead in some of the things that I'm talking about here, so apologize. Okay, so additives, there's your stabilizers. Potassium sorbate is extremely important. This is only a stabilizer. That's all it does. It's not used for anything else, at least in the way we use it. But it's you guys have seen this in many of your preserved foods, fruit juices that have preservatives in them. It's 90% of the time, it's some form of sorbate that you're using. So potassium sorbate is also known as a wine stabilizer. And at a certain point in your process, you're going to want to stabilize your wine. Well, what does that mean? Stabilizing wine meaning is you're going to prevent any additional kickoff of re-fermentation. Imagine this, you got a mead, right? And you fermented it completely and totally dry. And you drink some of that mead and you go, man, this is good, but could it be just a little sweeter? Well, guess what? You've still got some active yeast cells in there that are just asleep because they ran out of food to drink. So it's like the guy that fell asleep at the buffet, you know, because there was no more food out, and all of a sudden here comes the guys from Caesar's Palace putting out more food at the buffet, and all of a sudden you're alive because hey, they've restocked the buffet. Well, that's what the yeast waiting for. They're waiting for more food, and as soon as you go to back sweeten your mead, and if you haven't done the steps to stabilize, you're going to revigorate, you're going to re-kick off fermentation again, and you're not going to know it because you're going to back sweeten the taste. You're going to go, this is great. Then you're going to put it in a bottle, and then you're going to cork it. And then it's going to be either spitting out corks in your pantry, or it's going to be exploding if you've got an extremely tight cork. But one thing I need to tell you is that potassium sorbate will not stop an active fermentation. It will only assist in ceasing re-fermentation from starting after it has already stopped. All right, so the best thing I can say is what Sergio Matella of Melovino Winery or Meadery said, is that it's almost like you've got to take the yeast, hit them over the head with a baseball bat, knock them out, and then you do sorbate. And you knock them out by either A, cold crashing, or B, allowing them to go dormant because there's no other sugars left for them to eat. So are we clear on sorbate? Because that's important. Everybody nod their head yes. All right, Sandra and Laura's nodding for the entire group. So thank you for that clarification. Okay, additional additives, clarifiers, bentonite. It's a clay powder mixture that is used in sometimes in pre-fermentation or during active fermentation and post-fermentation. And it helps to, it's got both positively and negatively charged ions in there, which drag down some of the haze that's left over in a fermentation. You've got super clear, another form of clarifier. Super clear is typically used, well, not typically, it's always used at post-fermentation. Sparkloid, again, another post-fermentation clarifier. Now, let's talk about yeast.
Before we're moving on past the
Good, I need a drink.
clarifiers. So one other problem that you can have if you're making a melomel, you can end up with what's called a peptic haze. And those clarifiers a lot of times won't take care of that. What will often take care of it is peptic enzyme. And you can also stir peptic enzyme into the fruit. It's actually better to freeze the fruit before you add it to your mead because that helps break down the cell walls. And then you can stir peptic enzyme in at that time. You can also put it into the mead when the fruit is in there, and that can help clear up that haze. So if you try clarifiers and they're not doing the trick, peptic enzyme might be the way to go, especially with like strawberries and things that are high in pectin.
Yeah, very good point. Sometimes I just gloss right over those things, and that's why I have her, so she can remind me that that's something. She's a lot smarter than I am, just so you all know. I just want to go ahead and get that out there right now. Okay, so yeast is very, very important. You can't just grab, well, no, I'm sorry, you can't. You can grab any yeast that you want and throw it into a must. It'll ferment, chances are. Will it be what you want? Probably not. You've got to actually do some research on your yeast to figure out where you want your end product to go, and yeast selection is extremely important. So number one, yeast is dependent upon alcohol tolerance. Not all yeast will ferment up to 18%. Not all yeast will stop at 7%. So you want, and somebody's got their mic on, by the way. But so anyways, so yeast is very important as far as selecting your yeast. Alcohol tolerance, you got to know if you want a sack mead to go to 18%, well, chances are you're not going to want to use a Lalaman 71B that typically only goes to 14%. So alcohol tolerance is important. Fermentation temperature ranges is important too. Know where you're fermenting. The best place is a cool, dark place where you can keep your fermentation temperature in the high 60s, extremely low 70s. If you have a yeast that's got a tolerance of 78 to 80 degrees, and let's say you've got your fermenter bucket, which is capped and closed and away from sunlight, but it's sitting by your kitchen table, which has direct sunlight hitting on that. Number one, yeast fermenting is going to create heat on its own. So if you start a fermentation at 72 degrees, chances are in a 5-gallon bucket, that's going to get up to 76 degrees, 75 degrees, right? But as soon as you put that bucket by an open window that's got direct access to sunlight, that temperature may go up to 80, 82, 84, really, really quick. And as soon as you do that, your yeast is going to start to eat, metabolize the sugars 10 times faster than it should, because it's happy, it's hungry, it's hot, it's sweaty, and it's going to eat. And then you're going to have a very hot, burnt tasting mead. Some of you may like that, but I wouldn't. Now, conversely, if you take that same yeast and you slow the fermentation down, well, a slower, colder fermentation is going to allow more floral notes, more notes from the honey to come forward in the fermentation process. And that's why the vast majority of white wines, like your Chardonnays, your Pinot Gris, are fermented in much cooler temperatures in the lower 60s, maybe even high 50s, because it really slows the fermentation down and it allows the yeast time to really study the floral notes and not just burn through everything, right? So fermentation temperature is important. Don't push that aside.
If you are in a situation where you're just going to need to ferment and at higher temperatures, we are in Houston and we're headed into the summer, reality check. There are yeasts that do hot fermentations well. Quebec is one. I don't think we have them on the slide, do we? And Omega, there's a Quebec hothead and Omega yeast that you can ask your homebrew store about. And they actually do a pretty good job at fermenting at higher temperatures.
It ferments fast too. We had a Quebec going in the garage before we opened this place at 100+ temperature range. And it burnt through that stuff. But again, this yeast was specifically designed for hot fermentations. I thought it was okay. Cathy didn't like it much, so we haven't done it since, but we'll probably be doing some hot fermentations just to play around with it. Nutrient requirements, not all yeast is the same. Some yeast requires more nutrients than others. We'll get into this later. Flavor profile and esters. Hold on. Bye, baby. Love you. There goes my daughter who's having my grandbaby. So flavor profiles and esters are extremely important as far as a selection. Maybe you have a specialty honey. Maybe you have a meadow foam honey, and you really want to bring some of the notes of the marshmallows out. Well, you want to select a yeast that's going to enhance some of the esters and florals in that honey. So that's also important. And I'll give you guys some websites to look at for yeast selection here in a bit. Potential for SO2, sulfur dioxide. Sulfur dioxide is a common occurrence in mead. Some yeast produces more SO2. For the home scale, it's not really that big of a deal. For us, it's extremely important to know what our SO2 is. Potential for hydrogen sulfide. Hydrogen sulfide is also a natural occurrence in fermentation. Some yeast will present more H2S than others. So, and there's ways to combat that, but you need to know if you select a yeast that's got a very high profile of H2S production, then you need to figure out how to counter that, because at the end of your fermentation, you may smell it and go, is that rotten eggs in this mead? Can I drink this? Well, you need to know what you get, and you need to know how to counter that either during or after the fermentation process. So yeast selection is key. Okay, so yeast performance. We're going to kind of skip through some of these things. This all has to do with the doing a hydration on your yeast prior to pitching. We do not pitch dry. We don't just rip open a packet of yeast and dump it in, right? That's what we used to do. But we actually, Laura did that too. But we did some research and we were trying to figure out, well, why does our meat taste like, I can't say it, but poo-poo, right? So Laura can say it for me. She can tell everybody. So, and we were frustrated that we couldn't get consistent fermentations on mead. So we did research, and I suggest that you guys do your same research. And we found that one of the processes was rehydrating your yeast prior to pitching it. So it's basically giving the yeast a chance to start its life of eating sugars before it gets dumped into a high sugar content like honey. So, because what it does, it can typically shock a yeast, and then they're like stressed right at the beginning. And then they can never really gain the energy that they need to complete a good, clean fermentation. And Go Ferm, what you see on the screen here, is one of the things that we use to rehydrate. It's a mixture of nutrients and stuff that basically gets the yeast going. You got anything to add on that? Not really? Okay. So it's enhanced to develop yeast multiplication, avoids problem fermentations. Okay, using your equipment. I mentioned that a hydrometer is extremely important to your mead making process. So it measures the density in the liquid. Dissolved sugars or honeys that you're putting into your must is density, which is added to a liquid, and it is referred to as specific gravity. Brix is right here on the right. It's also another measurement of specific gravity. And in a typical hydrometer, you'll see the center section here, that is your potential ABV. Now, that doesn't tell you exactly where you're going to be. That's just going to give you a range of what your alcohol by volume is going to be in your finished product if you start at X and end at Y. Your mother's looking at you right there. Kathy's mother's right there. Okay, so let's do a test, right? Okay, so here is a picture of a hydrometer. It's kind of a zoomed in look here. That yellow line represents the must, okay? So there's your top of your must, and your hydrometer is floating in your must. So that yellow line represents where your hydrometer is in the top of the liquid. So that one right there is, I wish we could talk back and forth on it. That'd be great, right? But that starting SG, what do we think that is? So you've got your 1.100, there's a line, and then there's 2, 4, 6. So that yellow line, each one of those small black lines is 2 points. Every hydrometer is different, but for the majority that I've seen, they're all like this. So this one here, that's starting gravity is 1.106 or 1.1, 1.102, 1.104, 1.106. So that's your starting gravity. Very important to know what your starting gravity is. Now, we've completed fermentation, and your fermentation stops right here. Well, what is that fermentation? It's below 1. Is that possible? Yes, it is possible, because alcohol has a specific gravity, which is lighter than even water. And the specific gravity of water is 1. I believe the specific gravity of alcohol is 0.776, I think. So maybe you can all see my mouse moving on the screen, right? Sandra, can you see it? All right, cool. Thank you. So that line is 1 right there, right? And remember, I said every line is 2-point increments. So, whoa, where'd my mouse go? There it is. All right, so 1 minus 2 is 998, right? Look at there. So 0.998 is your final gravity. And that this entire fermentation dropped 108 points. And if you have I didn't put it on here, but if you've got a alcohol by volume calculator on your phone, you will do your starting gravity at 1.106, your final gravity at 0.998, and you're going to come up with probably 13% alcohol. So this mead that you just made is 13%. Could be what Laura's drinking right now. Maybe. Did she go get another glass? There you go. That's right. All right. So let's talk.
8%.
Woohoo. What was that again, Laura?
8%.
Ah, bull. It's not 8%. This is 7. All right. So that's planning like a boss. This is another important part of your mead making process. Please don't just, well, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I mean, a lot of the biggest successes were born from mistakes, right? So, but I recommend that you figure out where you want to go and you actually plan your batch. And that way that if you make a mistake, you know that, well, you planned it, you did all the math and the algebra and the equations and the geometry. There's no geometry. So, but you did all that stuff, right? To make certain that you have a good finished product. Why are you looking at me funny? So, I swear I've only had 2 of these. Okay. So here are some links. Please write these links down. These were very instrumental in our mead making process for the past so many years. Mead Made Right is a website built and maintained by Sergio Matula of Melovino Meadery in New Jersey. He is one of the champions of mead making in this world of ours here. Meadmaker.com batch builder. That is one of Cathy's favorite sites to go do some math and calculations. And gotmead.com, Vicki Rowe, an amazing champion for mead. She has a podcast every week. So I would suggest looking that up and attending or listening to one of her podcasts. She interviews some great mead makers. She hasn't interviewed me yet. I don't know what her problem is. Probably because she has no clue who I am. That's probably a start. So maybe I need to introduce myself and say, hey, you want to talk to a good mead maker? You talk to Cathy. So that's yeah, she makes her recipes. I stir the pot is what I do. Literally, I stir the pot. So everyone write down these websites. And I think this is going to be recorded for you guys to watch later, but these are very important in your batch building process. And I can't emphasize that enough. And again, these are 3 that we use. There's many more out there. So you just find what works best for you. Clean and sanitize all equipment. This is not the last time you're going to see or hear me say that because it's extremely important, probably one of the most important parts of mead making, at least for successful mead making. It's not an important part for mead making. It's an important part for successful mead making. All right, continue with batch planning. Always plan your batch, determine what you want to do, what your final product what you want it to be. Because if you don't know where you want it to go, you're just going to be stumbling throughout the process and figure out how you're going to get to your end result, or you're just going to be winging it. Maybe a great mead can be made from winging it, but I prefer to try to do it purposefully. That is determining your volume, your honey varietal, your yeast selection, anything else that you're going to put into your must, either pre or post fermentation, whether it's fruit, spices, whatever. You just got to kind of think about these things, because one additive that you do incorrectly can throw off your entire plan. And then it's almost like, all right, well, I just got to make the best of this. All right, so we do spreadsheets. We still do spreadsheets, and maybe there's a more efficient way to do it in a commercial world. We haven't figured that out yet, but it was very instrumental in successful mead making at home. So I would highly recommend doing spreadsheets. Again, did I mention clean and sanitize all your equipment? I'm not sure if I mentioned that before, but that's important. And again, no bleach, no bleach. Don't use bleach.
No vinegar either.
No vinegar. Don't use vinegar. If you use vinegar, you'll have vinegar. You'll make vinegar. And then you'll be like, well, what do I do with this vinegar? Well, you'll remember that you probably shouldn't have used vinegar for cleaning in the first place. So no vinegar unless you want vinegar. Think about that. Okay, batch planning. We're continuing batch planning here. I'm glad I put this slide in there. I'm not sure if I mentioned this, that you need to clean and sanitize all of your equipment. I think I mentioned how important that was, but I will mention it again. Clean, 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 sanitize, sanitize, sanitize. All right, so let's build a quick sample recipe. Here's my spreadsheet. Look at there. All right, so what is this called? This is called Mike's Blueberry. When did I start this? Oh, I started this when I created this presentation, November 14th of 2020. What's my batch size? 2 gallons. My honey varietals. I can't see it because Laura's face is right over that, but I'm assuming it was wildflower. There you go, Laura. Thank you. All right. What do I want the desired ABV to do? So remember, we're planning, right? So how strong do I want this mead? Well, I want this mead to be 12%. All right, so once I go to some of the recommended websites that I gave earlier, like batchbuilder.com or gotmead.com/calculator, I can determine if I want a 12% mead, then it's going to say with a few key clicks that you've got to click in, well, your starting gravity is going to be 1.092, and the final gravity is 1 over here. And I'm going to need to add 5.6 pounds of honey to make a total of 2-gallon batch. I want my yeast to be 71B. My yeast pitch, I'm going to add 2 grams of yeast of 71B, but remember, I'm going to rehydrate that yeast first. I'm going to use 2.5 grams of Go Ferm. This will tell you on Mead Made Right on their TOSNA calculator how much Go Ferm to use. I believe this says Houston Beekeepers Association is covering this one, but it says I think it's 50 milliliters of H2 on this batch. And for the Fermade O, we'll get into that here in a minute. That's part of these.
The nitrogen step feeding.
So
protocol.
we'll get into step feeding soon. So anyways, you kind of see what's going on here with this whole spreadsheet here and how it kind of keeps you on track. It tells you where you're starting and where you're going.
And just I know this, if you're seeing this for the first time, it may be a little bit intimidating, but the websites that he had mentioned on the previous slides, it's really just a matter of plugging in what you know. I know I want it to be 12%. I know what the volume is that I want to make. It's going to tell you what your specific what your starting gravity needs to be, how much honey, how much nutrient. It's going to give you all of that. So those calculations are actually really easy to do. It's just all on those websites with those little generators. They're super handy.
And this is my spreadsheet. I mean, you create a spreadsheet that works for you. So it doesn't mean that you have to follow this exactly. Okay, so this is the spreadsheet that's beneath that header page. Okay, so the previous page was, let's consider that a header at the top of an Excel spreadsheet. This below this, it is the process. It records every step that we take. Every time you touch that mead, write it down. Write down what you see, what you smell, what your SG is, what the temperature is, yada, yada, yada. You write everything down because if something happens, your process will tell a story. A lot of times it'll tell a story. A lot of times it'll tell you if you messed up, or a lot of times it'll say, this yeast just didn't kick off the way it should have kicked off. So, and by the time you do 10, 20, 30 batches, you'll have a systematic way of knowing that if this, then that. So if this happens, then this should happen. Or if I skip a nutrient feeding on this day, then maybe this will happen. So you'll create your own story as long as you take notes. All right, so on this one right here, this just kind of shows you the process. So on the 14th of November, I mixed up the must to a total SG of 1.092. I then added 10 pounds of blueberries in a mesh bag, and then I put 3 drops of peptic enzyme in there. Now notes off to the right, it says I added 2 Camden tablets. Now, what does a Camden tablet do? It prevents wild yeast from fermenting in your must. So all fruit, whether it's frozen or picked off a tree, will have some sort of wild yeast on it. Probably frozen fruit, much less than fruit picked right off a tree or a vine or a bush or what have you, but it's going to have wild yeast. And if you don't control your wild yeast, then your wild yeast will take over. And you don't want that because it goes at its own pace, at its own speed, and it doesn't listen to you or what you're doing. Okay, so I created a yeast slurry. I talked about Go Ferm, which is how we rehydrate the yeast. And then the next day, 24 hours after I added the Camden tablets to the must, because it had wild blueberries in there, 24 hours later, I then pitched the yeast and I stirred like crazy. So the next day on the 16th, I added my first batch of Fermade O, which is a nutrient addition. And then I took an SG. On the 17th, I added my second batch and then took an SG. And by the way, I'm stirring because this is the aerobic phase. On the 18th, I took another SG and another nutrient. On the 4th day, I did the 4th nutrient addition. Oh, hey, went back. And anyway, so you kind of see the process here that we're going for.
So I was what you see there going on with the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th nutrient additions. When I mentioned step feeding earlier, that's what's going on there. It's where just over the beginning part of the fermentation, you are contributing nutrients to the fermentation, mainly nitrogen. If you're fermenting honey, it's different than fermenting grape juice in traditional wines. Grape juice has abundant nutrient for those yeasts to have a good, strong fermentation, and honey just does not. And so a lot of times the fermentation of honey can be really rough, and the end result can be pretty harsh. It can have phenolics, which is tastes like chewing on Band-Aids. It can throw off a lot of sulfur. It can taste hot. And that all, it makes the product not drinkable, at least not immediately, and not enjoyable. And it usually required, now those faults will age out over time. Or you can, a lot of times I think mead is super sweet, a lot of times because those things are covered up, the results of the rough fermentation. But the step feeding regimen, it's a little bit of an extra step and an extra effort, but it will give the culture the nutrients it needs to do a clean fermentation, so that you can go ahead and drink your mead fairly early, not have to worry about aging it for 6 months to a year. And you might want to sweeten it, but sweeten it because you want it to be sweet. Don't sweeten it because you're having to cover up nasty flavors that came out of that rough fermentation.
Yeah, good point. Good point. So as you see off to the left-hand side, there's 3 phases. There's a lag phase. Basically, that's the phase as soon as you put your yeast, that's the phase before the yeast really gets settled and starts fermenting vigorously. Then you move into your aerobic phase. Your aerobic phase is your staggered nutrient addition and your vigorous stirs. You're introducing oxygen into the yeast and into the must, because your oxygen, or your yeast, needs that oxygen to have a healthy fermentation. And then you move into the anaerobic phase. Your anaerobic phase happens at your 1/3 sugar break. And your 1/3 sugar break, as noted, right? Oh, hey, look, I'm moving those pictures there. Sorry. Your 1/3 sugar break happens right here. And it's either before or after your 4th nutrient addition. If you get to your 1/3 sugar break before you get to your 4th nutrient, don't add it. So let's say you get to your 1st, 2nd, and 3rd nutrient, and then you're already at the prescribed gravity of your 3rd sugar break, which the websites will tell you what that is. If you reach your 3rd sugar break, stop adding nutrients. Your yeast is happy. Everything's cool. After your 3rd nutrient, or your 1/3 sugar break rather, that's when you reach your anaerobic phase. That's when you want to set it and forget it. You don't want to touch it until you think that it's done, or you're bubbling through the airlocks. You'll see that go bubble, bloop, 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 bloop. When it starts to slow and nearly just dissipate, that's when you need to check it. That's when you need to do your SG and see where you are. And then once you're done fermenting, when you're down to your gravity that you want, your target gravity or below, at a 2-gallon batch, even a 5-gallon batch, throw it in your fridge. Just cold crashes is what we call that. Shocks the yeast and it puts them to sleep. Remember I said put your yeast to sleep and hit them with the head with a baseball bat, and then you sorbate them. So that's what I'm talking about there. All right. Okay, so real quick, talking about preparing your must. This is for the previous batch, right? So you add a 1/2 gallon of water and 5.5 pounds of honey to your primary, and you stir, 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 stir. And then you fill your water up to the 2-gallon mark, which is previously marked on your bucket. So you need to know where your 2-gallon mark is. And then you check your specific gravity. Remember, our target on the previous spreadsheet was 1.092. And if you do this, you're going to be really close. If you do a 1/2 gallon of water, 5.6 pounds of honey, and then you fill to the 2 gallon mark, and then you stir, 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 stir. You should be really close. If you're too high, add water. Drop your specific gravity. If you're too low, add honey. Raise your specific gravity, but just do it in small increments at a time, because you can play catch up. You can be right here, go, oh, and you see what I'm saying? So it'll get out of hand really quick. And then a 2 gallon batch turns into a 30 gallon batch. And then you're drinking mead for months. Maybe it's not a bad thing. I don't know. All right. So, and then you add 10 pounds of blueberries in a mesh bag and drop that in your bucket. And then you add your 2 Camden tablets. Remember, that's metabisulfite. It prevents wild yeast from fermenting. Important, important, important. So you got to do that. Then 24 hours later, you want to create a yeast slurry. So this Pyrex thing over the right-hand side, that's kind of what we use there. And you want to, remember, these numbers are based off the previous recipe that we made. You want to add 2.5 grams of GoFerm to 50 milliliters of 110-degree water. You want to stir that GoFerm in there and have you a thermometer inside there so you can monitor the temperature. But once that temperature cools to 104 degrees, then you can slowly stir your 2 grams of yeast into that mixture. And then what's going to happen is you're going to create a warm, welcoming environment for that yeast. And it's going to have some sugars in there, which is the GoFerm, or some nutrients that it already wants. And it's going to be happy, and it's going to just relax and chill out. And then you're going to throw it into the must. Well, actually, you're going to let it rest for 15 to 20 minutes, because you're going to allow that 104 degrees to cool down to at least within 18 degrees of your must. So a thermometer is very important. If you throw it in there when the temperature varies too much, you could shock the yeast. So that's not what we're wanting to do. Remember, we're wanting to welcome them into a nice, cool, awesome environment where they want to stay and not freak out. And that needs to be within 18 degrees of your slurry and your must. So if your must is sitting at 70 degrees, then your slurry needs to be at 88 degrees or less. Now, if it's not, if your slurry is too hot, you can take a spoon and dip some of your cool must into the slurry a little bit at a time and just let that temperature start to drop. Now, what you're going to notice, especially on a large batch when you're doing a 5 gallon slurry, is that yeast just goes nuts, and it's going to start fermenting in the bucket whenever you put must in there and it starts to cool down. So it's kind of crazy. If you want to see what that looks like, just make you a 5 gallon slurry at your house and then bring it over here. We'll use it. So if it's not within 18 degrees, add a small amount of slurry to reduce the temperature. Pitch in the yeast in the slurry. Again, temperature is important. Make sure you're within 18 degrees. Vigorously stir into the mush. Remember, you're at the stage which is an aerobic stage. It needs and wants oxygen to thrive. So you need to give that yeast honey, sugars, and oxygen. So stir, stir, stir. All right, so feed me. Now, this is what Cathy was talking about, staggered nutrient addition, or TOSNA. You want to go?
Yes. So one of those websites had the TOSNA regimen on it. That gives you the details on the volume of nutrient that you want to feed.
And that was meadmaderight.
Meadmaderight.com. Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That is the regimen that we use with the GoFerm and the Fermado. There are other regimens that do a similar thing. I'm not really aware of where you would go for those particular calculations, but I think diammonium phosphate, or DAP, is another one that you can use. And then there's also Ferm K. And so you can find those online as well. But anyway, those, I think we've already pretty much covered.
Yeah, we kind of did.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, your nutrient addition helps to keep your yeast happy and energized, and helps to keep a nice and healthy fermentation, which is important, because if you got stressed yeast, and Cathy mentioned this earlier, before we found the staggered nutrient addition, we were making yeast that was amazing, or we were making mead that was amazing after it's set in the bottle for a year. We don't want that. So once you start doing your staggered nutrient additions, you can drink the mead a month after it's bottled, and it's phenomenal. So that's really important. The health of the yeast during fermentation is great. And like Cathy said, honey does not have a lot of nutrients like grapes do, like strawberries do, like so on and so forth. So you need to help that add those nutrients. And that's what this tailored organic staggered nutrient is all about. Priming fermentation, seal your bucket and fill the airlock. The process of primary fermentation, which is 10 days to 3 weeks. We kind of talked about the phases. You got your lag phase, you got your aerobic phase, you got your sugar break, and then your anaerobic phase. Remember, your sugar break separates your air phase to your no air phase. Racking in the secondary or your post-fermentation vessel, which is like a glass carboy or another like thing. And this is a 2-gallon demijohn, a post-fermentation vessel.
I was going to stop on that slide right there because you can see the layer of sediment at the bottom. So after your fermentation is complete, your yeast will collect together and do what's called flocculate. It's going to fall to the bottom and make that sediment layer. And whenever we say the word rack, it's a fancy winemaking word for siphon. So you're putting a tube down and you're letting the end of the tube sit just above that sediment layer, and then you're racking or siphoning off the clear portion. So I wanted to stop and talk about that on this slide because you can see that layer really clearly. And again, that's why after the primary fermentation is finished, why you would want a clear container for your mead so that you could see where to put the end of that racking cane to not pick up the sediment at the bottom.
Right. Now that's very important because after your primary fermentation, you don't want to get what's called the gross lees into your secondary or post-fermentation vessel. Now, when you got your post-fermentation vessel, you're still going to have some sediment. You're still going to have some flocculation. You're going to have yeast collect together, tannins, proteins collect together and drop down to the bottom, right? Now, I'm not sure who all knows this, but if you do a sur de liège in Chardonnay, that's where they're actually taking an aging Chardonnay in a barrel. And every day, once a week, twice a week, they're actually stirring up that fine lees in that Chardonnay. And that's what gives you that buttery flavor in a Chardonnay. You can do the same thing with any mead. You can do a sur de liège and you can stir up some of the fine lees back into the product. And it changes the mouthfeel. It does a number of things to it. It's quite nice. Okay, so post-fermentation, this is where oxidation is extremely dangerous. This is when you need to make sure that you add your sulfites. And again, we talked about potassium metabisulfite and Camden tablets in there.
On the reduction of headspace, can I drive with the cursor? Okay, so here you'll see that we've got the mead filled all the way up to the skinny neck part of the bottle. If you were to have your liquid level down around the wide part of the bottle, you would probably want to do what we call top off with either some more mead or something that is similar to the product that you're making, because you don't, in this picture, just a tiny bit of the surface is in contact with the air. But if you had it down here, then you would have a lot of surface contact with air, and that could potentially oxidize your mead.
Right. And a lot of times you don't have that extra mead or what have you, or maybe you already drank it. I don't know. You don't have anything extra to top off, right? Because who has extra mead at the house? So we used argon and nitrogen. CO2, kind of a last resort. A CO2 sitting on top of a mead over long periods of time could introduce carbonation into the product. So it's not really a good idea. So you're looking at doing maybe nitrogen as the mid-price range gas, or argon is the better noble gas to use if you want to just spritz some of this on the top of your product, and that creates that layer of protection. All right, stabilizing and clarification. Remember, we talked about sorbate. Sorbate is a stabilizer. It doesn't stop fermentation. It just helps to prevent fermentation from re-kicking off again. Clarifiers, we talked about bentonite. We talked about Kiesel saw. We talked about a couple of more. They're in the presentation if you want to go back and look. Oh, there they are. Sparkleoid, super clear, bentonite, pectic enzyme for heavy, fruity pectic hazes. Thyme is the best and cheapest stabilizer or a clarifier. It really is. You can't beat it. It works wonders, especially thyme in a cold environment. So if you're in no hurry and you've got room in the fridge, throw your carboy as long as you're topped up, okay? As long as you don't have a lot of headspace, because remember, the converse thing to time is oxygen and headspace. So you may have all the time in the world, but if you've got all the headspace in the world, yeah, you're toast. you just might as well forget about it. So time is great. Time is great. Flavorings, when bottling, you can add sugars, but only after you've sorbated it and ensure to the best of your ability that you're not going to restart a fermentation. You don't want those bottle bombs. The possibilities are endless. It's whatever your mind thinks of: fruits, herbs, spices, oat chip spirals, vanilla, whatever, chicken from leftover dinner. I've never done that before, so I think that would be kind of gross, but don't add chicken in there. If you do and it turns out well, let me know. So flavorings are possible in the primary or the secondary. If you do a fruit in the primary versus a fruit in the secondary, you can have different flavor outcomes. It can taste similar but different. So it's worth an experiment if you're serious about it. Use fermentation bags anytime you do fruit in a primary fermentation. Oh, and by the way, you can ferment in a carboy, the glass bottles with the skinny necks. You can do primary fermentation in there, but if you do primary fermentation in there with fruit, you're not getting it out, not without a lot of time.
I'll mention also, when you're using fruit in the primary fermentation, it's going to float on the top. So you need to be punching that down daily, actually probably twice a day. You punch down what they call the fruit cap, so that actually, well, even if you have it in a bag, you're going to need to keep pushing that down, because you need to get that fruit back in suspension. You can also have some spoilage issues if that fruit is just floating continuously on the top.
Right. Good point. Back sweetening, again, see the caution about bottle bombs. You don't want to back sweeten and you haven't stabilized your wine. Blending, you can blend yesterday's mead with tomorrow's mead. You can blend Laura's blueberry with Cathy's vanilla oak that she was drinking. Just, wow, that's gone. She's drinking off camera, apparently. So anyway, look at there, Laura's empty too. You ladies need to go back to the bottle. Methods of preserving, bottling, cork and cap, grosh, wine bags, demijohns for bulk aging, as long as you can maintain the headspace in there. Kegs are great for storage. You can put in a keg and then put some CO2 or some nitrogen right on top of it. And hey, look at there. Wow, we made it through. That is, I think I took a little bit more time than I really should have, but I apologize.
Not at all. I loved it. Lots of detail. I'm glad we're recording this so I can go back and listen some more.
There are a lot of details, and I really wish I could do this in 30 minutes. And I probably could if somebody says, how do you make mead from start to finish? Go. But I tend to start at the beginning with history and what is mead. And
yes, I like that. Well, so everybody on the phone, you can either put your questions in the chat box, or you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask a question directly to Mike and Cathy. Any questions out there?
I see the chat box.
Do you ever make champagne where you put second yeast in there and then cap the bottle?
I've had, I did try that one time with an astragalin with the maple syrup honey combo. And I got inconsistent results. Actually, some of the bottles carbonated well and some of them were flat. It's not something that I've really attempted to perfect, because frankly, from the commercial side of it, forced carbonation is just so easy and predictable. It is something that I think would be nice to go back and learn a little bit more about. But yeah, my experience with that is minimal.
Okay. And Kyle, you want to ask your question?
Sure. So I was just curious how exactly you guys are using like argon and nitrogen and CO2 and stuff. Like, I guess I'm having a little difficulty imagining how you're introducing that into like the carboy, or how you said like spritz a little argon on it. I'm like, what in the world? How is this happening?
we're going to do a little tour, right? So
okay.
back here, you see I've got, oh, where are you? Hey, there it is. The hose goes down. And then we've got a big hose, right? So,
Okay.
and that is all nitrogen that's coming from our main tanks in the back. So if you notice over here, well, we've got product that is, so in this one right here, this is our semi-sweet, and we've already taken some of it out, and there's currently 65 gallons in this one here, but this is in an 85-gallon tote. So we're just basically, is it on? We're just basically squirting it right into the top, right? So
Okay.
you would do a very similar thing at home. So when we were mead making at the house, I went to a place called Conroe Welding Supply. And I guarantee you there's a welding supply place around you. You can get a 5-pound or a 20-pound bottle for $100. And then they'll fill it for $30. So every time you come back, you bought a bottle or you're renting a bottle. So it costs you $30 for a fill of nitrogen. And you just put the regulator on that you have got to buy. And then you just put a little air nozzle or air valve on there. And you just turn on your nitrogen, or argon is what we use at home. And then you just squirt, squirt, squirt right in the top of your demijohn.
Okay.
Wow. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's great.
So I had a question. So obviously not
I'm sorry.
all honey is created the same, right? So you have honeys from different wildflowers or from other products that they forage. You mentioned meadow foam, which I have some here too, and they have different tastes to them. How does that impact the mead? Is it just sugar, or does that flavor
No.
impact the mead?
I mean, the flavor of the honey really does come through. Depending if you do your homework and you do your batch building and you select a yeast that's going to allow that meadow foam or that star thistle or mesquite to come forward. Because if you do a yeast that just burns right through the sugars, it's going to eat right through all of the aromatics as well.
Okay.
So on a honey, especially something like metafoam, it's fairly pricey. You're not just, it's not your wildflower. It would be definitely worth taking the time to read through details about the yeast profiles. It will tell you what sort of, is it going to play up toasty coconut marshmallow notes? Is it going to be like citrusy notes? And make sure that you're picking a yeast that's going to complement what you're perceiving in the honey. Because otherwise it's going to be a little bit of a waste of that particular varietal. Right. Another option is to not use that specialty honey as the fermentable, and then use it as the back sweetening agent, because honey does change its characteristics when it's fermented. And so if you're really wanting, that particular varietal to come through, you might want to just use that to back sweeten after, so that you still have really just the raw honey itself coming through in the flavor.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, but you can certainly ferment a wildflower and a orange blossom side by side. And without even knowing what you're drinking, you can smell and taste the difference. You can certainly taste the citrus flavors and smell the aromatics in in an orange blossom, and certainly pick it out of a lineup between it and wildflower.
Oh, neat. Well, so at the meadery today, do you guys have different varietals, or right now are you using the same honey across all of your different products?
We do have a single, I guess let's call it our house mead, right? So we had to start with something. And so for all of our, what we call our house mead, our standard varietals, we're going to use a local wildflower from Wendy Reed of Reed Honey Farms in Montgomery, Texas. So amazing woman. And if you've never met Wendy, she's about 5 foot nothing, about nothing. And she can carry 2 65 or 55 gallon or 5 gallon, 65 pound pails with no problem.
We all know Wendy.
She's a rock star.
She's a rock star.
All right. Because she is amazing. Yeah. So, and the thing is, she won't let me touch the buckets, and it's, I'm trying to be chivalrous here. I was like, Wendy, let me help. No, Mike, no, you're buying the honey. I'm like, yeah, but you've got 14 more buckets to unload. So, but anyway, she's an amazing woman. But yes, so we get all of our, we do all of our standard series stuff from Wendy's local wildflower honey. However, we do have in the back, we've got mesquite blossom, we've got orange blossom, we've got Tupelo, we've got Eastern buckwheat. If you've never had Eastern buckwheat,
No.
you need to come by the meadery and you need to try Eastern buckwheat. Just, that's all I'm gonna say.
Okay.
What else do we have back there?
Saturday, I'll see you.
We have basswood. I believe,
Basswood,
maybe some
Yopon, sage, yeah.
Blackberry, maybe.
No, we don't have any
We
blackberry.
don't have any blackberry.
But yeah, I mean, we're going to be doing a ton of varietals, but anytime you step out of the wildflower realm, your cost is, it
So much
increases
more.
exponentially. Yeah,
Especially for the volume that you're trying to produce. I mean, it's a lot
right,
of honey.
right.
Okay. All right. Any other questions out there? Laura's giving you the high five. Kyle, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think I was curious about if you notice any differences between like I guess like raw honey versus like a processed honey prior to it going into being used as meat.
You know, I don't know that I can adequately answer that because when we first started making them, and maybe Cathy wants to say something, but when we first started making mead, it was clover honey from Costco.
Okay.
It still said raw honey
Yeah,
on
so-
the bottle.
But
So
was it raw? I don't know. I mean,
Mhm.
so I don't know that I've ever made mead with honey that wasn't truly raw.
I guess a bochet would be in that category because we're cooking
Well,
it,
yeah,
we're boiling
true.
it.
Yeah.
But there shouldn't, there are some recipes, especially older recipes, that want you to sanitize the honey. Most commercial meaderies do not do that.
They
The
don't.
honey, and probably the bee community is pretty aware, it's antiseptic in and of itself, and there's really not any need to do that. You don't really need to pasteurize honey.
Mhm. Yeah. I see a hand raised from Kenneth.
Yes, hey, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Can you give me your ranges for specific gravity, what you call semi-sweet and sweet?
Sure. So when we start when we start all of our fermentations, to be honest, we'll start at a specific gravity range of about 1.092 to 1.094. We will ferment dry. And when that ferments dry from that specific gravity, it is going to be about 12%. Now, when I say ferment dry, I mean it goes to 1. It doesn't mean that it's going to stop at 1. If the yeast is happy, it's going to burn right to 998, 997, 996. We've had to go to 994. As a matter of fact, that batch right there is sitting at 996. All right. It is bone dry. So when we go to a semi-sweet, we will back sweeten it. And that's what we're currently doing is back sweetening. After we sorbate, naturally, we talked about that. So if I want to go to the edge, right, to the border of semi-sweet to sweet, I'm going to go to 10 or 1.030 or 1030, as I call it. If I want to do a sweet, that sucker's going anything above 1030. If I want to do a dessert style, that's going to be, that's going to be 1050 and above.
I think I heard a good reference. Dr. Pepper is about 1060.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. Our off-dry products, the vast majority of our products that we have right now, we have 5 lines out from our first fermentation. All but 1 are a specific gravity of 1. They are dry. So we had to make 1, which was a semi-sweet, which is at 1030 or 1.030, because we've got a lot of people that love their sweet meats, but I'm a dry guy, just like my humor.
Mike, we got.
Cathy, I think you just came up with your next most popular flavor.
Oh, what's that?
Pepper mead.
Pepper.
Dr. Pepper mead.
Dr. Pepper.
Pepper.
Mike, I got a couple more questions on chat. One
Yeah.
is, can you kind of give some people an idea of what your sanitizing area looks like and maybe some of the size of some of the equipment that you're using or suggesting they use?
No, that's top secret.
And then another question is, do you guys offer classes on how to make mead besides like this kind of presentation?
Okay, so the answer to the last question is yes. seeing as that we've only been open for 9 weeks, we're to be honest, I say this with the utmost amount of sincerity, we're trying to figure out what we're doing here and how to
How to run a
accommodate.
tasting
Yeah,
room.
yeah. How
As
to run-
opposed to just making meat. They're not the same thing.
Yeah, we've hosted parties in our garage before, which was fantastic. But now we're hosting people that aren't our neighbors, and I can't tell to go piss off. So we're trying to figure out, how to do this. I guess just with customer service in mind and gratitude for the people that walk in. So, but the long short of that answer is yes, we will offer classes. When we will do that, I don't know. I'm hoping to do it soon because I love to educate. Cathy is an educator. She loves to educate. Actually, she loves to teach. I love to talk. I don't know what I'm saying, but Cathy comes along behind me and corrects. So yes, the answer to your question is yes. Okay, so we have a very small production room. So essentially, this is our production room. We've got two 250-gallon primary tanks. Those are those right there. We were going to go with some 500-gallon or 2,000-liter tanks. But when we signed the lease on this place, we had ceiling issues, but we took out the ceiling and we no longer had issues, but we had already bought the tanks. So we could have gone with bigger ones. Now our secondary vessels are 85-gallon conicals, which are right here. And we call those our post-fermentation flavoring vessels. So, that's where the primary batch goes after it's ready, after it's clear or clarified to a point where we like it. That's where we send it all.
So
We have-
sanitation area.
yeah.
shower.
Oh, sanitation is dirty back there.
We asked about sanitation.
I don't want people to see how dirty it is back there.
Clean, you said.
Look, it's a secret door. Okay, so here's really sanitation is key, right? And it has to do with your before and after process. So it's a big shower, right? So you see all those 5-gallon buckets in there? We've got Star Sands right there. We'll mix up Star Sands in the bucket, just like you would do at home. And that's how we clean. Now we've got tank scrubbers right there. So it's really no difference than you would do at home by mixing in a 5-gallon bucket with your sanitizer. It's just that when we sanitize that bucket, we'll put the Star Sands in there. It's about 2 tablespoons per gallon. And then we'll carry that bucket to our production area. I'll rinse my hands in it. I'll put all my tools in it. We'll put some in squirt bottles. So, I mean, that's really it. Now, whenever we're cleaning big tanks, we'll use a pump, right? So we'll use what's called a SIP. It's a SIP ball valve. This guy right here. So it's got the pump connection goes in here, and this is a ball that spins around inside the tank, and it'll sit there and it will spray hot water with PBW in it, professional brewer wash, and after that we'll rinse it, and then we'll do the sip with Star Sand, and then that's it. So that's really our process there.
Mike, do you just use tap water for mixing with your fermentation and for
Good
cleaning?
question. I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to show you what that is. So the answer to your question is yes, we did start with tap water. We are on the City of Conroe water system, and I've been told that it's really good water, and I haven't got an issue with it. However, we're in a commercial environment, right? So we can't make mistakes. If we make a mistake, we want to know where that mistake is. So I didn't want water to be any variable in that, because if we make a batch of mead tomorrow and it turns out perfect, hey, that's great. But if we make a batch of mead in 6 weeks and it turns out less than perfect, and I can't rule out that the pump station at the city water wasn't doing a clean out day, and they sent some trash down the line. So we have got a 300-gallon reverse osmosis system right there.
Wow.
So we installed that. Was one of our first bigger purchases after we moved in, just because, to be honest, if there's a problem, I want to know for sure that it's my problem. not a water problem, something I can't control. And if we can control the water, then that takes one variable out of the mix.
And then another question from Kim is when you add in honey, add honey to already started batch, how do you prevent, do you have to do anything to prevent separation of that honey from the batch?
Okay, so at home and, oh, hey, there's our tap wall. Look at that. Isn't that cool?
This is cool.
Yeah. So at home, we would, okay, so let's say I've got a 5-gallon bucket, right? Or a 5-gallon batch at home. And I wanted to back sweeten it to, let's say from 1 to 10, 15, kind of off dry. I would take the prescribed amount of honey. I would put it in a bucket. I would take a small amount of mead from my primary batch, and I would stir like crazy. And I would really get that solution mixed in. And then once I felt that the honey was mixed up into the solution of mead, I would then pour that mead back into the primary batch, and then I would do gentle stirs. All right, because the worst thing that you can do right now is introduce a great amount of oxygen to your finished product, because that's going to start the process of oxidation. And that's what you want to prevent more than anything else. So what we do here is we do that times 50. Okay, so I've got a big 100-gallon mix tank. So I will take, and I will do what's called, as best I can, an oxygenless transfer. So I will take mead from the bottom racking port of my big tank. I'll put it into my 100-gallon mix tank. I will then put honey in there for back sweetening, and I'll mix it like crazy. And then I'll recirculate the big tank through the pump, down through the bottom racking, back up to the top, through the bottom. But I've never got the mead touching oxygen, so I'm not splashing the mead on top, right? So my hose is actually in the liquid.
I was gonna say, if you're trying to do an oxygenless transfer at home, one option is, like he was saying, when you're gonna back sweeten, mix a small amount of your mead with the honey and get that well incorporated and put it in the bottom of the carboy that you're gonna transfer into. And then if you did have a tank of carbon dioxide or nitrogen or argon or something like that, you can purge that vessel of oxygen. So if you're squirting the noble gas down in there, it's going to force the oxygen out. It's going to be a heavier gas. And so you'll get that second vessel that you're racking into free of oxygen. So then when you rack on top of it, and you're going to touch the tube at the end of that's coming out of the racking cane to the side of the vessel, so that it's not splashing. It's just going to like trickle down the side of the carboy and gently introduce into that back sweetening mixture in the bottom, and that will minimize the oxygen introduction into your finished mead while you're back sweetening.
Okay, and then Anton has one other question, which is, how do you account for the sugar in the added fruits in your primary?
That's the beauty of those online calculators.
We let others do the work for us.
Yeah, you will be able to figure out what the calculation is for the additional sugar. Yeah.
Thank you.
Come on, more questions. I love questions. I love making up answers. I mean, telling you.
What are your hours of your meadery?
Okay, that's the only question that we don't have an exact answer to. Only thing I can tell you is when we open. We open Thursdays at 4. We open Fridays at 2. We open Saturdays at noon, and we open Sundays at 2. I've got posted times that we close at 8, but that never happens. So we are on the downtown square, and when people look at me and go, "Oh my God, it's 9:30, you should be closed," I'm like, no, there's 2 things that I require. Number 1 is that the drinks are flowing. Number 2, that the conversation is good. If either of those fail, I'm going to ask you to leave. So if you're drinking and I enjoy the conversation, I'll stay here with you until the very end, or until the state of Texas allows me to. And it's been fun. Thursday night, we stayed till 11:30. Friday night, we were here till 11. Saturday night, we were here till 11. Sunday, we were here till, actually, we closed at 6 on Sunday, but I was here till 7. So I enjoy talking to people. People enjoy coming here and talking to me. And sometimes it just gets carried away.
Sounds fun.
It is. It is. Yes, this is a 7% IPA style draft mead. It's quite good.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't think when we talked about our flavors that we mentioned adding hops. That's a lot of fun when you're doing the hydromels and you're carbonating them to make the beer style meads with the dry hops. Dry hopping meaning that after you finish your mead, you're basically making a tea bag with hops and then just keep that in your finished mead until you have the flavor that you want.
Okay, I'm gonna do one last question and then turn it back to.
Really quick, I just noticed Kyle Wolf said, I wonder why the logo had hops. So on our logo, you know, we've got, well, maybe it's right here. So we've got the bee, right? And the body of the bee is a hop pellet and the wings of the bee are fruit leaves. So that's our logo.
Very nice.
So Anton had one more question, which is, when you're putting fruit in a bag, like blueberries, do you smash them up a bit or does the fermentation break down the skin?
Pectic enzyme or pectin takes care of that. So when you put some pectic enzyme inside your fruit as it's macerating, then it will kind of do that on its own.
Also freezing them first.
Yes, freezing them first is the most important thing, because as it thaws, it's going to break down on its own. Then you add the pectin in there as well. But when we take them out, we have very clean hands, and then I'll hold and Cathy will squeeze, or Cathy will hold and I'll squeeze. So yes, we will wring that bag out, get all the fruit and juice out of it that we can.
Great tips. All right, well, everybody give them a round of applause. Mike, Cathy, thank you so much. This was so fascinating. And I can't wait to come out and see your place.
Yeah, me too. Bring your credit card.
I'll bring some good conversation. How about that?
Perfect. I love it.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. You're always welcome back at our meetings. So please don't be a stranger.
Thank you so much. We appreciate the invite.
Absolutely. All right. So is everybody ready for our door prizes? You can probably guess today what the prizes are, right? It's going to be some mead.
Hey, you're not giving away my product, are you?
Yes, we are. We're buying it from you, Mike, so it's all right.
Yeah. All right, Joe, you want to name our winners?
Okay, hopefully. Okay, so you have to be two things to win here at the Houston Beekeepers Association. You have to be a member, and you still have to be online when we give away this stuff, or at the meeting when we have a real meeting. So the first person who wins is Matt Borman. Matt, are you still here?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you.
All right.
Woohoo!
Matt, you win a bottle of mead from Mike and Cathy's shop. So
nice.
And
awesome. I'm excited.
So you have, but the thing is, you have to go out there to get it. So there's that little key to the.
There's that tidbit.
And then the next winner is Joseph Lofy, Lofy.
Yes, sir.
All right. And then our third and final winner is Deidre Hardiman. You there?
Deidre.
He dropped off. Oh, no, he's still here. Deidre, you hear me? Deidre. Oh, I'm saying it wrong. That's what you're saying. Okay, so those are our three winners, Matt, Joseph, and Deidre. And they're also all new members, which is great. More new members than merrier. Congratulations, you guys, for A, being new members, and B, being winners of our raffle.
Wonderful. Congratulations, guys. Joe will work with you to make sure you get those, get that mead and go enjoy it for sure. And hopefully I'll see you out there too, because I'm going to swing by this weekend. Our next meeting is June 15th. So be keeping an eye on both the SCEP and our post to Facebook. Also going to share some upcoming announcements from the Texas Beekeepers Association. The annual conference is actually going to be in Galveston this year, and they're looking for volunteers. So keep an eye on both resources so that you get all the firsthand information as soon as it comes out. But you guys have a wonderful evening, and thank you so much for joining us. Thanks, Mike, Cathy.
Thank you, guys.
See you soon.
Bye.